Most haunted houses have a rhythm. Footsteps in the attic, scratches behind the walls, doors that slam, whispers that echo. People expect sound, chaos, warnings, rage. But there's another kind of haunting, one that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock, it doesn't creak, it just waits. Some houses are quiet, not peaceful, silent. Rooms where sound doesn't carry the way it should. Spaces where even your own footsteps feel like an intrusion. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. It's in these places that people report something strange. Not a figure, not a presence, but a pressure. A weight in the corners of the room. A sense that something is always there, listening. They don't describe it as a ghost. There's no tragic backstory. No unfinished business. No visible form drifting down the hallway. Whatever this thing is, it doesn't haunt. It observes. It lingers in the architecture, beneath floorboards, behind mirrors, inside closets that feel too deep. And it never moves. It simply is. Over the years, researchers, mediums, and urban explorers have tried to classify it. Some say it's a kind of watcher. Others call it a parasite. But the oldest stories suggest something different, something ancient, something that's been here longer than the walls around it, long before the house, maybe even before people. They call it the listener. And unlike other entities, it doesn't want to scare you. It just wants to know you. Your voice, your patterns, your habits, every word you speak, every silence you sit in. And if you stay long enough, it doesn't just listen. It begins to remember. Welcome to Tales from the Forbidden Library, where not everything that haunts you moves, and not everything that listens wants you to stop talking. There's a reason most people never notice it right away. The listener doesn't occupy the entire house. It only chooses one spot, a single corner. Sometimes a hallway, sometimes the space beneath the stairs, but always the quietest part of the home. The place where no one lingers, where the air is just a little colder, not freezing, not dramatic, just resistant to warmth. You can open all the windows, turn on heaters, light candles, it won't matter. That patch of floor never feels right. The shadows in that corner are always just a little darker. Sound doesn't bounce the same way. And if you sit there long enough, you'll start to notice it. A sense that the silence is not empty. It's full of attention, full of weight. People often explain it away. Bad insulation, drafts, uneven flooring. But deep down, they know. It's the way their eyes are always drawn back to that space, the way children refuse to play near it, the way pets growl or stop in their tracks. Something about that spot feels watched, measured, heard. What's strange is how consistent it is. Homes built on different continents, different eras, different materials, and yet the stories align. There was one room we never used. The hallway always gave me chills. That closet never felt empty, even when it was. These aren't just hauntings, they're patterns that repeat across generations and geography. Something ancient enough to leave fingerprints everywhere. In some places, it shows up almost immediately, within days of someone moving in. In others, it takes time, weeks, months, as if it's waiting to learn the rhythms of the house, to memorize the occupants, not just their words, but their silences, the gaps between conversations, the things they choose not to say. That's where it feeds, not on noise, but on the quiet beneath it. Some believe it's the echo of something forgotten, a ritual left unfinished, a thought someone buried so deeply it became a presence. But more and more, the theory is shifting. It's not tied to death. It's not the spirit of a person. It's something else entirely. A kind of observer, a being that simply waits and listens. You'll know you found its corner when time feels slow there, when sitting in the silence feels heavier than it should, When you find yourself whispering for no reason at all. Not out of fear, but as if trying not to disturb something. That's the listener's space. And it doesn't like to be acknowledged. What makes it worse is how subtle it is. It doesn't flicker lights or break plates. It doesn't scream in the night. Its presence is quiet, patient. The longer you live near it, the more you begin to adapt, lowering your voice, avoiding certain spaces, skipping over topics without realizing why. You begin to shape yourself around its presence, and that's exactly what it wants. Because the moment you adjust for it, you've made room for it. And once the listener knows you're willing to share space, it stops hiding, it stops staying in the corner, and it begins to move closer. Some people never notice it at all. They live in the house for years, brushing past the cold corner without a second thought. They sleep through the silence. They ignore the weight in the room. But the listener doesn't need your attention to survive. It just needs your presence. And if you stay long enough, it begins to reshape the space around you. And eventually, it reshapes you. The changes don't start with fear. They start with forgetting. You misplace objects more often. You forget conversations you clearly remember having. Sometimes you walk into a room and can't remember why you're there. Not just once, but over and over. At first, it feels like normal absent-mindedness, but then it starts happening with people. Familiar faces seem different. Your own reflection feels delayed. Your thoughts don't arrive in your own voice anymore. One man who lived alone in an inherited farmhouse said it started with changes in his speech. He'd listen back to voicemails he never remembered recording, his voice, his words, but not his thoughts. Another woman, a single mother in Maine, began hearing lullabies on her baby monitor long after her child had outgrown them. Soft, steady humming, too clear to be static, too calm to be a warning. People who've stayed in listener-infested homes for too long often speak in detached tones when recalling their time there. Not dramatic, not frightened, just dulled, like the memories have been filtered. They remember waking in the middle of the night without panic, but not knowing why. They remember sitting in complete darkness and forgetting how long they'd been there. They remember starting sentences and not being sure who they were talking to. Over time, the listener doesn't just observe. It begins to mimic. You'll hear a cough from an empty room that sounds like yours. You'll hear your name spoken in your own voice from somewhere behind you. People say it's not meant to scare, it's meant to practice, like it's learning how to wear you, how to echo you perfectly. And when it does, the people around you will start to notice the difference, even if they don't say it out loud. Some report vivid dreams, always the same house, but unfamiliar rooms, furniture in the wrong place, family members with wrong eyes or wrong voices. They'll wake up and go about their day, only to see those exact changes reflected in the real world weeks later. As if the listener is not only learning the present, but rewriting the future. One tenant moved out after 6 months when she realized her houseplants wouldn't grow in one half of the living room. They'd die overnight, leaves curling inward like they were shrinking away from something. No pests, no mold, just dead every time. She never went back, left everything behind. But the most disturbing stories come from those who return to these houses after years away, only to find that the listener remembers them. A former resident may revisit an old home for a sale, an inspection, a memory. And suddenly, that cold corner is still there. The silence wraps around them like a familiar blanket. And the dreams start again that same night. They say it doesn't get angry. It doesn't chase. It doesn't punish. It simply waits for you to stay long enough to forget what silence is supposed to sound like. And once you forget that, it speaks. But it doesn't use words. It uses you. There's a moment, usually deep into the stay, after weeks or months, when the silence becomes too perfect. Not peaceful, not still, perfect. So flawless it feels unnatural, like the sound has been pulled out of the air on purpose. It's in that vacuum where people start to hear it for the first time. The breath. Not loud, not heavy. A soft exhale, drawn long and slow, like someone in the room is trying not to disturb you. People say it doesn't come from any direction. It's not behind you or above you. It's around you, wrapped in the walls, tucked between the spaces of your thoughts. And once you hear it, it becomes harder to pretend the listener is just a story. Some have tried recording it, but the sound never shows up on playback. What they get instead is audio distortion, blips of static, reversed murmurs, sometimes even silence where there should be noise. But one man caught something else, a slowed-down version of his own voice, whispering words he never said. The audio engineers who analyzed it said it wasn't a glitch. It was intentional mimicry. Others have reported that the breath doesn't always come alone. Sometimes, just as it ends, they hear the faintest creak, like someone shifting their weight. As if the listener, after all this time, is finally moving. Not to attack, not to reveal itself, but to lean closer. That's when the fear sets in. Not panic, not horror, dread. The heavy, suffocating kind that wraps itself around your spine and settles into your bones. Because in that moment, you realize the silence was never empty. It was always waiting, and the breath is its way of letting you know it's been listening long enough. Some people try to speak to it, not in challenge, but in desperation. They whisper, "What do you want?" Or, "Are you here?" Thinking maybe acknowledgement will break the spell. But what comes back is never a voice, never an answer, just another breath. And the subtle sense that whatever was far away is now closer. One woman claimed she turned on every appliance in her house to drown it out. TVs, radios, fans, anything that made noise. And yet, she could still hear it. Not with her ears, she said, but inside her chest. Like her own lungs were echoing something else, something older. There are cases where this breath triggers physical symptoms. Shortness of breath, tightness in the throat, migraines with no source. But the worst is the insomnia. Not because they can't sleep, but because they fear what they'll hear if they wake up in the middle of the night and the house is too quiet. Some survivors say the listener doesn't follow you when you leave. Others aren't so sure. They say once it knows you, once it learns the rhythm of your life, it doesn't need the house anymore. It just needs your silence. And when it finds it again, it breathes, not to speak, not to warn, but to remind you that you're still being heard. The listener doesn't knock. It doesn't crawl across ceilings or slam doors at 3 a.m. It never needed to, because movement was never its weapon. Silence was, stillness, presence. And the longer you live near it, the more you realize it was never hiding. It was just waiting for you to notice. What makes it different from other entities is its patience. Ghosts cry out, spirits replay, demons demand. But the listener? It simply exists. It doesn't care if you believe in it. It doesn't even care if you fear it. All it wants is time. And your silence. The two things most people are willing to give without question. In the end, it doesn't matter how it got there. Maybe it formed out of thought, over centuries of stories and solitude. Maybe it's something older than language, something that drifted between worlds before we ever built walls to trap it inside. Or maybe it's part of the house itself. Not a guest, not an intruder, a foundation, a root, a heartbeat made of silence. Those who leave often think they've escaped it, and maybe they have. But they always remember that one room, that one corner, that one impossible breath. It stays with them, like a story told too quietly to forget. And every now and then, in moments of perfect stillness, they hear it again. Not loud, not close, but there. The listener doesn't fade. It doesn't weaken. It remembers. It catalogues. And over time, it learns how to blend, how to stop being a presence and start becoming a feature, a natural part of the home, the way the floorboards creak, the way the shadows settle, until it no longer waits in one room. It is the room. That's what most people never realize. The listener doesn't need to move because the house moves around it. You bring your life, your memories, your voice, and all it has to do is listen. And once you forget what true silence sounds like, it's already inside you, echoing, waiting. They say some houses remember their occupants, but some occupants carry the house with them, in the way they hesitate before speaking, in the way they lower their voice when they're alone, in the way they pause, not because they've lost their train of thought, but because something is still listening. You don't need to live in a haunted house to feel it. You just need to be quiet long enough. Long enough for the listener to know you're ready. Because once you give it space, it never gives it back. And now that you've heard its story, it knows your voice too. If this story whispered something familiar, leave a comment below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who's always felt watched in the quiet. Because not everything you hear needs to speak.